June is Audiobook Month. Join Viviana, the Enchantress of books, and the Audiobook Lovin Series as she celebrates the authors and narrators who bring your favorite stories to life.
Hi, darlings. No, your ears aren't broken. This is not Viviana, aka Enchantress. They handed me the keys to the kingdom for one episode, so naturally, I've taken over and changed the Wi-Fi password. I'm Curtis Michael Holland, your host for a day while Viviana is off doing something heroic like battling their inbox or pretending to meditate. I'll be guiding you through today's chaos, though. Today, we're talking all things America's Not-So-Sweetheart with author Blair Hanson, whose audiobook I narrated and is now available in all forms, so buckle up, hydrate, and let's get messy in the best way possible. Hi, Blair. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So before we begin, I would like you to tell us a bit about your debut young adult novel, America's Not-So-Sweetheart.
Sure. So America's Not-So-Sweetheart tells the story of a 17-year-old named Alec who goes on a competitive reality show to try and win money for his family's struggling wildlife rehabilitation center. And he actually ends up winning the show, but to do so, he has to betray Joaquin, who is his showmance on the show. And that's a move that a lot of the online fandom does not appreciate because Joaquin is the fan favorite. So that's kind of the backstory to the novel. But when the story actually opens, we see that even a year later, Alec is still struggling with the online criticism of his moves. And he's really desperate to show people that he's changed, that he's a quote unquote good person now. And so when Joaquin reaches out to him and offers the chance to go on this high profile road trip together, Alec jumps at the chance because one, he thinks that if people see that Joaquin's taking pictures with Alec, that people see like, oh, maybe Alec's not that bad of a person after all. And then two, he is kind of not so secretly still in love with Joaquin. So that's the general setup, but as I'm sure you can attest, things don't exactly go according to Alec's plan.
And it's so fun. I love that. I love your take on the YA genre with this one. I was like, oh my God, like it's just there's so much great stuff in there. Is there anything that inspired this, like a moment or an experience?
Yeah, so I think that it's, as a traditionally published author, I think it's so interesting that when you start drafting the book versus when it actually comes out, several years pass. So it's fun to look back at what might have inspired this when I started drafting it way back in 2022. I think at the time I was sending a previous manuscript out to agents, and I think that manuscript had a lot of solid, good points to it. But I felt like I didn't actually love it. I don't know what was missing from it, but I just wasn't truly passionate about the project. So what I did is I started a list and I just wrote down all these random things that interested me the most. So I had reality TV, I had complicated relationships, I had seeking validation through external entities and through social media. And then I sat back and I tried to think of a way to integrate all these very random things. And America's Not-So-Sweetheart is what I came up with. I think I'm really inspired with this book with my love for reality TV. And with that comes both the positives of, it's drama and it's fun to watch, but then also there are negatives. And I found that there are definitely segments of the online communities that are perhaps not the kindest towards contestants on the show. So I thought it was really interesting to see how a character who is portrayed on this show might react to the fandom reaction after the show airs.
When I was reading it, I was thinking like, I don't know, I could imagine this happening like in my past young adult life.
Yeah.
Was any of this like influenced by your life too?
So this is my family's favorite question because I think they're really trying to think that this is a self-insert story, which I can 100% say that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
None of the characters are based on me or anyone in my life. I will say that certain plot events maybe are inspired. So for example, I think like a lot of people, I've been in relationships where one person wants one thing and one person wants the other thing. And, that is a complicated situation. But I can't really say that none of the characters were based on anyone in my actual life.
Is that how you usually go about your writing? It's like not, it's purely imagination or
So I'll be honest, in the past, I definitely did very much base characters on real people, but I am way past that. That's too dangerous for me. So everything's a work of fiction that I come up with.
cool. And what do you hope that readers are gonna, what themes or messages are gonna resonate with them?
Yeah, so this is a tricky question because I don't want to spoil
Hmm.
anything.
Yeah.
But I think when I think about the book, I think the major takeaway would be, I guess, Alex's search for external validation, and that comes in the form of uh, wanting to be loved by social media, wanting a relationship with Joaquin, wanting his friends and family to like him, and even just Alec trying to prove to himself that he is this good person, that the monster everyone saw on television is not actually who he is as a person. And I think even though I think most people won't end up going on reality TV and having their whole lives broadcast for 60 minutes every week for 15 weeks, I do think that the theme of wanting to be liked, of using social media to portray a certain aspect of yourself, I think that is relatable. But with that also comes downside. So I do want readers to kind of see how Alec and some of the other contestants in the show react to the way that they're portrayed, and then how that manifests in terms of how they want to be viewed, or how they want perspectives of them to be changed.
Mm.
And I think also, getting back to the fandoms of these shows, which are so passionate and I've certainly spent countless hours reading the commentary, but I think it's very easy for us to be critical of the contestants as they're portrayed on the show, but we have to keep in mind that these people are put in very high stress situations, and they don't always make the correct moves or anything like that. But I think we just have to be mindful of that. So I think that's something I would want readers to take into account as well.
Mm. Yeah, I really liked how you handled the characters, and it wasn't just like, oh, this guy should be bad, this guy should be good. And when I did my first read of it, when I was preparing to narrate, I had to start over because I was like, wait, is this character like not a good person or what? And the answer is maybe nobody's just all good, maybe nobody's all bad, even in a novel, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something usually when you're writing a novel, you have a clear set, like, oh, I want this character to be the villain, or this character to be, a super likable character. But I think when I was writing this book, I just let the facts say what they were, and I think people might draw their different conclusions of who they find likable and who they not, or who they don't find likable. And I think you're right that I think most people in life, they're not all one way or all the other. I think they're very complicated and messy, and that was definitely my intention with this book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I really liked it. And so writing in the young adult perspective, I mean, I'm guessing you're not a young adult now, but in this era, like I don't know, when I grew up, we were doing T9 texting, and I wasn't able to get a phone until I could pay for it when I was like 17. So having all the text exchanges and things in here, it made it seem like it was of this generation. And with
Yeah.
the reality shows and things like that, it seemed like it was of this generation, like teens now. How did
Mhm.
you write in that voice and make sure it felt authentic?
So America's Not So Sweetheart is actually the 12th book that I wrote. It's the first to be published, but the 12th book that I wrote.
Yeah.
So I wrote my first book when I was in seventh grade. So my pitch at the time, when I was sending the manuscript out to agents, was, I'm a teen, so I know exactly how teens speak. I just wrote it however my friends and I would talk. But I had a realization a few years ago that, okay, well, I'm kind of aged out of the whole teenage speak, the whole young adult demographic. So maybe the phrases that my friends and I were using when we were in high school are not commonly used now. So I think to do my best to try and have an authentic teen voice, I used to have a retail job, so I worked with a lot of younger people with that. So I would kind of, okay, they're using this type of phrasing, they're not really saying this, which my friends and I
Mm,
X number of years ago would use. I think also just reading within I write contemporary YA, so just reading other contemporary YA novels and seeing how other authors have handled that, I think those were the two main ways that I tried to replicate what a teenage voice would sound like.
Cool. And yeah, I'm a teacher, so until the end of this year. So I always hear how they talk. So I feel like I would be and I feel like you did an accurate representation too without without
That was
pushing
the
too hard.
goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you work at, by the way? You said you worked in retail?
Yeah, I worked at a Dick's Sporting Goods.
Okay, cool. I worked at an Old Navy,
Yeah.
so that's why it's just a little side
Yeah,
question.
retail. I think retail is the absolute hardest job that I will ever have. It's so stressful, so little pay, and it's just, yeah, it was awful. But I'm out
Yeah.
of it now, so
Yes, you've made it. Um,
yes.
so I want to talk a bit about the audiobook just because I'm so curious and I know
Yeah.
a lot of narrators and other audiobook lovers listen to this podcast and
Hmm.
I hope that they want to know this information too. So first off, I want to know like how involved were you in the process of being involved with your audiobook? You know, how did it go? Were they like, "Hey, we're making it into an audiobook. Do you want to know who's going to do it or anything?"
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I was very much hands off on this whole process. So what happened was, so I sold the book to a publisher
Hmm.
for the hardcover and ebook version, and so we were working on edits with all that. I didn't know what was happening with any of the audiobook rights until I got an email. I think it was back in October from my editor. It was a two-sentence email basically saying, the rights have been sold. We'll let you know when we have more information. I was like, cool. And I just went back to working on my edits.
Hmm.
And then I received an information sheet, just asking some basic questions for the audiobook. And then I'm actually curious, I'll toss the question back to you here. I received a list of potential narrators. So I'm wondering if you put in for this, if they had you a few people in mind, or like I'm curious how that application process works.
Yeah, so it depends on the publisher or the independent author or whoever is involved in it. It's kind of like it's a little wild west with audiobooks because
Yeah.
it can just be a whole range of things. Um, Sometimes you get an audition, sometimes you see an audition posted or an open call and you submit. But for this one, I knew I was on the roster of this one company and they just said, "Do
Mhm.
you want to do it?" It was like the
Okay.
best, and that's what I kind of prefer. Auditioning, of course,
Yeah.
like you know, it keeps your acting muscles fit. But when someone
Mhm.
just says, "Do you want some money and this great job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I would love that."
Yeah.
And everybody, like most narrators love doing like YA or like the really, you know, the cool stuff. Because
Yeah.
there's not so much of it that you can do it regularly, unless you're like a
Yeah.
superstar. I'm on my way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so they sent me a list of a few different narrators, and then I went on everyone's website and listened to them, and I was like, oh my God, everyone is so good. I don't know how to choose, but I think the reason why I chose you was just on your website, you had just such a wide range of different voices. So I think that was what drew me to you in particular when I was selecting. And so I told my top preference, and then here we are. So
Cool. Well, thank you. Feeding my family and my artistic soul. Do you listen
yes.
to audiobooks yourself?
I've listened to a few audiobooks. I will say in general, I'm more old-fashioned. I prefer having the hard copy in my hands. But I do
Hmm.
think that audiobooks are great because one, they make the books more accessible to a wider range of people. But two, I also know that a lot of people are busy, so they don't always have time to sit down with, the traditional hardcover copy. But one of my old supervisors, she had about a 50-minute ride to work. So every day going to and from work, she would listen to an audiobook. So if you're doing, almost 2 hours every day, that right there gives you the chance to read a book.
Hmm.
So I do think that they definitely have a benefit.
Yeah. Did you get to listen to the audiobook at all?
I actually just got access to the audiobook a few days ago,
Oh my gosh.
and I have to I have to say, when my first listen, I listened to I think the first two sentences, and I had to immediately shut it down because I was like I don't know. There's just something about reading or listening to your own work that I was not prepared for it.
Yeah.
But I did actually earlier today. I did go through and I listened to a few of the scenes, and I was like, okay, like I'm in a better mental state where I actually can listen to my own words read back to me. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember like the one of the first audiobooks that my parents were like listening to. They were like, "Oh, like let's put it on in the car," when I was visiting them, and it said like
yeah,
some really explicit things because it was a dirty romance. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I never want to hear my parent like I don't ever want my parents to hear me
yeah,
say that line."
yeah.
Um, and yeah, how do you think if there's like one or maybe two different scenes that you think listeners will like to hear in audio, like without giving away some of the turning points, which there are many.
Yeah, hard to not spoil, but I think in
Yeah.
general, the scenes that I would be most interested or that I was most excited to listen to, so the ones that I went back and I listened to myself were scenes where Alec and Joaquin were interacting. So whether that was, having a disagreement or confessing their feelings for each other or just pining away. I
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, this story, there's a lot happening, but I think obviously Alec and Joaquin are a huge part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their interactions are, from listening, were really interesting to hear how you were able to capture the emotion.
Mm.
Yes, I think that is a really good benefit of audiobooks too, is because you do get to hear how the characters are interacting with each other. So I think we've all been there where someone sends a text and you're like, okay, like, are they mad at me? Are they making a joke? You're not sure.
Yeah.
So I think potentially if you're reading a hardcover copy, you could have the same impression where you're not really sure what I was intending there, but I think the audiobook definitely makes it clear what the intentions are with the characters.
Mm. Joaquin and Alec, I love what you did with their relationship. Like I felt the angst and I was like, oh, like I felt like a little nostalgic. I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's young gay
it's
love.
definitely,
It ain't perfect.
yeah, it makes me, yeah, relationships are messy. We'll just leave it there. But
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, people need to
yeah,
they need to read it because yeah.
yeah,
Without saying I don't want to ruin it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, God.
yeah.
Like I can't.
I think it's fair to say
I'm
it's
just
a
leaving
little
that.
messy, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and let's talk a bit about like how you write. I always find it so interesting because like as an actor, as a narrator, I'm very character driven, perspective driven. Where do you start with it all?
Okay. So it's funny because in my everyday life, I'm a total plotter. So I have my agenda book and I will write 30 different tasks and I'll get the satisfaction of like crossing them off. I like map out every part of my life, except when it comes to writing. So there's this thing in the writing community, you're either a plotter or a pantser, and a pantser
Hmm.
means like you're just flying by the seat of your pants. And that's very much me, which is hard once, you're on a contract and you have a synopsis you're supposed to follow and everything like that. So for example, I'm working on my next book and I have the synopsis I'm supposed to be following and I'm like, oh, it's so challenging to be following an outline. Um,
Hmm. Is it because you're following an outline because the publisher is expecting a certain story, like a specific thing that you sold to them?
yeah, and I mean there's some flexibility with it. So I'm sure that if things go if I don't follow it exactly, it would be a discussion with my editor and we could figure out what to do. But yeah,
Huh.
usually when I start a book, I have a very loose idea of what I want to do with it. And usually the second half is very murky, and then I just discover it. In this case, with this next book, I have my ending, and I have these huge events that I have to try and follow. And that has been a little challenging, but
Yeah, I'll
I'm
bet.
getting there.
Creativity in business is just it's a wild beast. But
Yeah,
I
for
wouldn't have
sure.
it any other way. It's funny.
Yeah.
Uh, is there anything you do to like to do you have like a unique warm up or any rituals that you do before you write?
So before I start drafting a book, I'll just make either a Word document or I have this little notebook that I'll just write random lines in. And these lines, some of them end up making it into the book, but a lot of them are just for vibes. So
Hmm.
I actually have the book in front of me for this book. And actually, the first note I have to myself is the very first line of America's Not So Sweetheart. And that is pretty much the only thing that did not change in my edits of the book. But a lot of them are just, I don't know, just things that pop into my head and they don't really make it into the book, but um, they help me get into the mindset. In terms of day-to-day writing, I don't really have any uh, warm-ups, so to speak. Like I'm sure you might have vocal exercises or something like that,
Hmm.
but I just a lot of the time I have to just sneak in some paragraphs when I have the chance. So I just get right to it.
Cool. Wait, you said you have the book in front of you when you were writing the book? How did that?
No, it's just a notebook that
Oh,
has just random musings, and I always try with the best of intentions to get as many of these lines into the book as possible, but then the story
cool.
takes a different path, or I just can't find a way to shoehorn in these random lines. So,
I
but yeah,
see.
I'm flipping through. Some of these lines definitely ended up in the book in this case.
Oh, cool. I like that. That's a romantic idea. I like that.
Yeah, it's a very romanticized idea of writing, but
Hmm.
the reality is you can't always, yeah,
Yeah.
things change a lot.
Yeah. It's funny when a lot of narrators go to prepare for a book. Sometimes, like, just absentmindedly, we go to look for the audiobook. And we're like, wait, we're making the dang thing. Oh my God. Uh,
Yeah,
but to prepare for it, because sometimes it's easier to listen, or faster.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so do you write with young adult readers in mind? Or I think it's a statistic that most YA readers are actually not even, they're like regular adults. They're full-fledged adults. So do you write with young adult readers in mind?
Yeah, I would say I definitely write with young adult readers in mind. Like I said, I have been writing YA since seventh grade, so it's kind
Hmm.
of I feel like it's my sweet spot, and I feel like my voice and the kind of themes that I want to explore are very YA-ish. And I think especially these days, it is. I think teens need books of all kinds, and not saying like my book is going to change the world or anything like that, but I do think that there's a lot that can be explored in the teenage years.
Hmm.
So I think I definitely do write with YA in mind.
Cool. And it's very Midwesty. It's all set in the Midwest with the
Yeah,
road trip being there, the places
yeah.
being all around there mostly. Um, does it have a personal connection to yourself, to you?
So the one place that maybe is outside of the Midwest, which I guess is kind of a mini spoiler, kind of not.
Hmm.
But I just won't say what city it is, but it is the city.
Yeah.
Um, so that to me is a place that can't say I know all that well, but over the past years I have been going to and have I would say a complicated relationship to. So I think that part of the
Ooh.
book is kind of like a half love story to that city, but also more complicated. I think especially maybe not so much in the final version, but I think an earlier version of the book like really went into different neighborhoods within that city and everything like that.
Hmm.
So I think that part is some of the cities or towns that Alec and Joaquin visit, I've never been to myself and have just had to do research by Google Images and looking at different resources. But I think a lot of the towns I go to, it's very small townish, and I
Hmm.
think that is relatable to me. Um, so yeah.
Cool. And was there any part of the process of writing this particular novel that was difficult or that you dreaded about the publishing process or the writing process that you can share?
Oh yeah, so I have a lot of things. I'll try and keep it to a limited few. I think because so like I said, when I was coming up with the idea of this book, I had my list and I had, I want a reality TV aspect, I want this aspect, and it was just all things that I loved. I thought that writing this book would be so easy, but I would say it actually took me longer to draft this book than any other book I've ever written.
Hmm.
And I think part of that was because the plot changed a lot. So the first half of the story kind of stayed the same. from first draft to final version, but the second half was completely rewritten. So I think I was just really I was struggling to write a story in the second half that was just not going to work. And once
Mm.
I figured out what I need to do, then the words came easily.
Hmm.
But I think I really underestimated how hard it would be to write a road trip book. So one, having a very compressed timeline of only a few days, and two,
Hmm.
having, for the most part, really only two characters and having several chapters in a row where really they only have each other to interact with. And I think this was especially true in the earlier versions. In this final version, I think I was able to find ways to kind of give them their space from each other and integrate other characters so that it wasn't just the Alec and Joaquin show the whole time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I really, really struggle with that because I'm used to having a larger cast of characters in previous books. The story unfolds over the course of weeks or even months. So those were two things I didn't expect going into it that really gave me trouble. And I can say I am not going to be writing any road trip books anytime soon. It was not. I think, yeah. I mean, I like road trip books, but as a writer, I found it very, very frustrating
Hmm.
to be able to overcome those things.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was frustrated not with the road trip part, but just with the choices these guys made. I was like, no. Like
Yeah, it's not the best decision making, but
no, but it was great. And is there something like surprising you learned while you were, in the publishing process that you didn't know before you got into it?
yeah. So I look back at my past, well, just limited to the past year. And I just look back, there's so many things I would have done differently. And most of them I can't really fault myself for. It was just, this is all new to me. I'd written a million books, but had never gotten an agent, never gotten a book deal, never had to do like formal edits and copy edits and everything like that. Um, I think the one thing that I don't know if I didn't learn this, but I think I had to remind myself of this is that at the end of the day, the power is kind of in like it is my story. And I think it's very
Hmm.
easy when you're writing a book and you just want an agent so badly. You want to sell your book, you want to have it out in bookstores. That it's just so easy to forget that you are the one with the power.
Hmm.
And I think I was lucky in that my agent, my editor, the publisher, I really had a pretty good experience overall. So there's no drama. There were no edits where we were fighting back and forth over. But I think that's something that I became more conscious of as I progressed throughout this process and something I want to keep in mind moving forward. Um, yeah. And I think I forgot to answer the second half of a question earlier about
Oh
any
yeah.
parts of the writing process that I
Yeah.
dread or do not enjoy.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's marketing and promotion. So I am not active on social media. I don't like social media, which I know is funny because it's a social media driven book.
Hmm.
Um, Thankfully, the publisher has been pretty great about that. So I just will send out a little post here and there. But that is definitely like, yeah, just having to be a public figure in general. And I know, like, obviously, I'm not a huge Taylor Swift level person, but like,
Not
just
yet.
yeah, being a public figure for the first time ever it's been interesting.
Yeah. I got to do stuff like that too, but like I like just getting into the work. I like being in the creative process and having a
Yeah,
life. The social media stuff, and it's such a social media driven industry as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there any chance we're gonna hear or see any of your previous 12 novels that weren't released?
Okay, so most of them, yeah. So as I'm sure you can imagine, the middle school ones, there's a reason they were not published, and the reason was writing quality.
Hmm.
It was actually funny because on the eve of my book coming out, I found the first ever book I wrote, and I read through the first page. I was cringing the whole time, but I read through it. And
Oh.
interestingly, both America's Not So Sweetheart and this new one both open up on a baseball field. So I was like, wow, this is such a cute full circle moment. But yeah, so a lot of the earlier ones, they're terrible. Do not want to think about them. Um, yeah, I cringe a lot when I think of many of the manuscripts. I think some of the manuscripts they have potential, but I think for me, writing is it's very much of what era I'm in my life, of what my headspace is like. So, for example, America's Not So Sweetheart, as much as I love it, I'm just in a totally different place in my life where I don't think I could write that book today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also it's like more fun if you do something new, right? Like I don't want to go back to the book I wrote in 2013 and rehash all that. So yeah, I mean maybe bits and pieces um will make their way into future works, but yeah, I'm definitely not going
Mm-hmm.
to rewrite a whole story.
Cool. Are there other genres we're gonna hear from you or see from you?
TBD on that. So all 12 books have 13 if I include the book I'm working on right now are
Mm-hmm.
contemporary YA. And like I was saying, I think that's definitely my sweet spot. I like work that's grounded in reality. Young adult, I I think it works well with what I want to do with my books. We'll see. We'll see what the future holds. I do think that there is something to be said to switching things up as well. The problem is I don't really know what I would pivot to, but for now, definitely happy with contemporary YA.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice that you would give to anyone who wants to get into writing specifically YA fiction?
Um, yeah, so I think my advice really can apply to most like fiction writers, maybe even nonfiction writers, but
Mm-hmm.
and it's such cliche advice, but it's honestly just finding people who write in your genre and becoming friends with them. So I can say this past year has been, very rewarding, and I'm so grateful, but also very stressful for me. And I think
Mm.
what really kept me grounded was having writing friends, especially ones who were at similar stages as me. So I have one writing friend, their book came out about a month before mine. I have another writing friend, her book is coming out in a few months. And so we've been able to kind of trade what's going on and calm each other down when we're stressed. And there's, having friends and family as a support system, that's great too. Like I love venting to my mom about things, and she's just like, okay, okay, okay. But
Oh,
like, she doesn't understand
yeah.
necessarily all the nitty gritty details of the publishing industry. So I think it's really important to have that support system of fellow writers, and then also they can give you free feedback on your work. So I mean that's an amazing benefit. um, and I will say, so I'm a very introverted person. I'm not the person who's usually, like I said, I don't really like social media, so I'm not usually reaching too far out. But I will say every single one of my writing friends happened because one of the two parties reached out and, just said, hey, I'm also publishing in this genre, like, do you want to be friends? And yeah, so I say, as long as you're respectful and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that, I say go ahead and just, yeah, I think writing friends are a great resource to have.
Cool. I like having author friends too. Um,
Yeah.
so could you take us back to when you finally got to hold your book in your hands when it came to you? I'm imagining it being like
Yeah.
shipped to you in a box with like a lot of those little peanut things in it.
Yeah, so no peanut things.
Oh.
But yeah, so obviously this was something that, going back to middle school again, like this was something I always envisioned, like the day that I would hold my book in my hands. And I was actually kind of frustrated because so I actually got two sets of books. I got my advanced copies, which are the uncorrected proofs, and they're soft cover. And then I also got my final hardcover author copy. So I got the advanced copies a few months before, and we had a whole email chain going. I think my publicist said that she got them, my agent said that she got them, and I did not get them. I was like, everyone else is getting these books before me. And so I was
Mm.
super frustrated about that. But then I
Yeah.
finally got them. And originally I wanted to just open them all by myself. And then, my mom was there. So I was like, okay, like you can watch me open them. And then my brother showed up. And then I was like, okay. And then my brother's girlfriend showed up. And it's like, okay, this is like I had envisioned this being like a very powerful moment just for me to celebrate, and ended up being like everyone there. And so I opened them and I'm taking them out. And then my dad comes in and he starts like talking to my brother's girlfriend. He's congratulating her about something. I was like, hello, like I'm accomplishing my life dream here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it was definitely weird. Because at that point I had seen, um, I had seen the layout of the book, what the text would look like, everything like that, but just like physically holding it in my hands, it was, I didn't really know how to feel at first. And then I was in my bed and I was just like flipping through it, looking at random scenes. I was like, okay, this is so cool. But then I started getting paranoid, like, oh my gosh, like at that point I had already submitted the final version of the book. And I was like, oh, if I catch a typo or something like that, then I'm gonna feel terrible about myself. So then since then I have not looked at all. I've not read the past book because I'm too paranoid about finding a typo. But I
Mm.
will say that uh, about a week ago, I was signing copies of the book for a few close friends and family members, and I like that was just such a powerful moment that is really hard for me to describe. And I just want every aspiring author to feel what it feels like to be writing the book and say, "Hey, mom, I did it! Like I finally accomplished this dream that I spent
Yeah.
over half of my life trying to achieve." So, yeah, it's just it's the weirdest feeling. Like every day, I'll wake up and yeah, like oh, like this is actually a thing that happened to me.
Right. Congratulations from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so awesome. And I've got to say, because a lot of the time when I narrate a book, I'll find typos and I usually correct or let the editor know. But there weren't
Mhm.
any that I noticed in yours. So,
Yeah. I mean, even when I was flipping through the advanced copies, I wasn't finding typos, but I was like, oh, I can't shut off the editor brain in me. So I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I should have worded that this way. I should have
Uh,
like expanded on this conversation. Like, but there comes a time where I read this book literally 100 times, and I have to move on with my life at some point because
yeah.
otherwise this book would still be unpublished, and I would just be spending my whole life trying to publish one book. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was a lot of work.
Yeah. And now we're coming up to lucky number 13. So what's
Yes.
a core message that you like, or what's like the essence of you connecting to the world with your writing? What is for why and for what?
Yeah, so this is something that has changed a lot over the years. So once again, I'll throw it back to middle school, and I had all these daydreams of becoming rich and famous, going on talk shows and getting on Celebrity Big Brother because I'm a teenage author and look at how amazing I am. And yeah, like you said earlier, I'm not exactly in middle school anymore, so obviously those dreams did not come into fruition. But I think I don't know. For me, it's just really I don't know. I just love writing and I just want to get my work out there. And um, like I said, I don't think that my book will change the world, but I would hope that, some readers will read it and they'll connect to something in it. And maybe it'll make them start thinking about different things. And yeah.
Hmm. Cool.
But I think I would keep writing. I mean, it's been so many books that I think I would have, even if this one had been published, I think I would have just kept writing forever. I mean, I actually don't really like writing that much. I actually love editing. So like first drafts for me are painful, but then once I'm able to actually start making the draft look nice, that's the part of writing that I like the best.
Hmm. Cool. And are there any plans for a sequel or a book in the same universe as America's
So
Not So Sweetheart?
the short answer is absolutely not. So I have never, okay, for a few reasons. One, I have never, with any of my previous works, ever even considered doing any type of sequel. I just feel like once I'm done with the story, like I put my heart and soul into it, and then once I'm done with it, like I'm done. I want to move on to something else. And then I think the second primary reason would be with this story in particular, and I don't want hard not to hard to really say this point without spoiling anything.
Hmm.
Um, but I think I'm fine with where things ended with this. And then when I think about what a potential sequel would look like, I know what it would look like. And I, again, can't really spoil anything, but it's not a book that I want to write. And I don't think it's a book that people would really want to read. But if I held to what I think would happen in real life, I just don't, I think I'm ready to move on, I think is the long and short of it.
Cool. And do you think anything is going to change for you after this, your first big release?
In terms of my life or
Yeah. Yeah,
writing,
your life or your career. Yeah.
writing. Okay. So actually, for my life, I don't really think. I mean, of course, I've learned life lessons and all that through this. I think in terms of my life, Not really. So, for example, when we're filming this, at least for me, it's June 21st. My book came out June 17th, and there was a lot of, being tagged in social media on release day and everything like that, and it felt like a whirlwind. But even 4 days after that, I'm like, okay, like the world did not end. I'm back to being my mostly anonymous self. Um, so I think that, and I like that. I
Mm-hmm.
think as a writer, I think writing is so interesting because you always kind of want your most recent book to be your worst quality book. Because I always want to be evolving as a writer. I always want to be getting better as a writer. So I think even though I think America's Not So Sweetheart, I mean, obviously it's the one that got me published, but I think it's my favorite book that I've ever written. But in
Mm.
a weird way, I kind of want it to be the worst book I've ever written.
Huh.
So I think I've already even working on this next book, like I've seen how I've improved in certain ways. So that's cool to see. And especially if I go back and I look at that book when I wrote when I was 13, it's definitely I've definitely evolved a little bit, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we're getting to the end of this, uh, can you give us any clues of what's coming out next or what you're working on next?
Yeah, I can give a few clues. So I was
Yeah.
actually able to announce about a month ago that I do have the next book, which is unrelated, is coming out next year. The very brief overview would be the main character lives in this town that has been suffering from poor water quality for years, and he obviously wants to change this. So he teams up with his boyfriend and his best friend, and they try and come up with some creative, we'll say, morally ambiguous ways to try and get money for their
Hmm.
town. And if you've read America's Not So Sweetheart, you'll probably predict that I love having these morally gray characters
Yeah.
who, come in with their plan and then the plan does not exactly go how they want it to be. So I can say that is a very it's another messy book, just in a different way from America's Not So Sweetheart.
Cool. Well, I'm so excited for you, and I'm glad we got to meet. But
Yes.
that's a wrap, folks. So you survived an episode without Viviana. Honestly, give yourself a round of applause or a cookie or both. Come on, why not? And big thanks for hanging out with me, Curtis Michael Holland, and author Blair Hanson, while Viviana was off adulting or communing with the void. Anyways, if you liked today's episode, tell a friend. If you didn't, tell your ex, because they deserve it. Make sure to follow us on social media if you have yet to do so. You can find me at Curtis Vova, Blair at Blair Hanson Books. You can also find all these links on the Audiobook Lovin 2025 series page at the Viviana Enchantress of Books website. Keep listening to the Audiobook Lovin series for more great chats, teasers, and who knows what else Viviana is cooking up. Until then, stay fabulous, stay curious, and remember, don't let anyone dull your sparkle or steal your snacks.
If you enjoyed the Audiobook Lovin series and you want more, join the Audiobook Lovin podcast Patreon for early access to podcasts, exclusive content like the Would You Rather game and dinner party guests, and additional incentives such as bloopers, graphics, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobooklovin. Thank you for joining Viviana and her guests for this podcast, and we hope you tune in again as we continue to celebrate Audiobook Month. The Audiobook Lovin series is hosted by Viviana, the Enchantress of Books. Please make sure to visit the main page linked within the post to learn more about the entire Audiobook Lovin series and the enchanting author and narrator guests who have joined us over the years. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a review wherever you listened. Until next time, happy listening. Audiobook Lovin hopes you have enjoyed this program.